Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is September 30th, 2024. You're listening, watching the Daily AI Show. And today we are talking about what's going on in OpenAI. There's been a lot in the news recently. Let me get my screen off here. There's been a lot in the news recently about OpenAI, not just about investing, not just about necessarily people leaving or what they're building. There's just a lot going on in the company. And what we want to really talk about today is like, hey, is this normal for like an extraordinarily not normal startup company like OpenAI? I mean, they're sort of in a class of their own. And to have that conversation to start off, it's me, I'm Brian, and we also have Andy. I think we'll also have Beth here in a little bit. But Andy, it's just us for now. And as you were saying right before we're like, hey, we can handle this, right? So this is sort of a big conversation. It's not just like, yeah, there's been a lot of news in the last week about their CTO leaving. And in fact, in our newsletter that I put out on Sunday, I talked about the 11 different people, I think it was 11, who had left in the last 12 months, let's say. And we know about some of the high profile ones. And then there's some names in there that maybe aren't as known to the public, like Ilya's, but they certainly are important there. So maybe that's where we start this conversation, Andy, is like, as much as OpenAI has sort of been a crazy story, in a lot of ways, they are a startup. In a lot of ways, they are a company that's morphing and going through transitions from their initial structure of being not-for-profit to something that is a direct competitor to Anthropic and xAI, and needing a corporate structure that probably better mimics that for investing and everything else. So let's just start the conversation there. In your opinion, Andy, like, is this really something to be worried about, that people are leaving? Or this happens all the time, right? In business, is this really like people leave, people start and they reach their natural level, or they're burnt out, or they have families at home and they're working 70 hours a week, whatever. People leave all the time. So what's your take on that part of it? And then we'll expand into the other areas of OpenAI as well.
Yeah, I think this does happen in startups, but there's special conditions that OpenAI has achieved that put it beyond the state of a startup.
Right.
This is actually a very large company now. So it has culturally probably some of the elements of a startup, but operationally, this is the market leader. It's the dominant player out there, and its valuation has skyrocketed to the level where it's just there's no way to contain it back at its nonprofit roots. It has to become a for-profit company. And so this exodus of individuals who were there at the beginning and some of whom joined early on in the process years ago now, mind you, OpenAI didn't suddenly start up and then flash in 2023. It has been around for a while. And it was seeded with some of the very brightest minds who wanted to be a part of a moonshot mission to get to artificial general intelligence. And now they've demonstrated to the world this extraordinary competence of a platform that can be accessed by hundreds of millions of people and deliver super intelligence that we only dreamed of years before in a commercial way. So what happens when there is the emergence of a huge market opportunity demonstrated by OpenAI, which was not really a commercial exploitation of a market originally in its conception? But what happens when there's suddenly this huge market out there and venture money is chasing every possible corner of that? Where do they find the sort of the intellectual and experiential talent that's involved with AI? OpenAI. So those people who are leaving have been there years. They've vested their interests, whatever those interests are, in this transition to an equity holding company. And now there's people putting enormous sums in front of them to go out and do something else that's adjacent to, or maybe even in line with and competitive with what OpenAI is doing. And there's a huge sucking sound that's going to happen when such success has been achieved. So it's not an implosion. It's a seed burst. This is the pop that's happening with this company and all of the brightest minds who have been delivering the sort of industry leading capabilities, those are now being seeded for new ventures, and it's just an irresistible draw. Even if some of them are never going to produce anything again, they're just going to retire on the enormous wealth that they've accumulated already at OpenAI.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think most of these people are still young. They're vital, and they're driven by the same passions that they had at OpenAI, and now they want to move on to their own thing. And most of them are going to get enormous funding, just like Ilya did.
Yep.
And so, like Mira, she's gonna have her own company here shortly.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Fine. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you on all of that. I love the visual of seed burst, and like what we're really looking at here. And, I think what'll be good, Carl couldn't be here today, but I do want to bring in some paraphrasing of what Carl was talking about in our Slack channel. And as we were talking about and getting ready for the show, as we do, on all the topics we have about what's our approach, our angle, whatever, right? Whatever we're going to, not our angle, but like, what are we going to bring to the conversation? And it was really interesting, right? Because Andy, you saw Carl was like, hey, I want to be careful of making any sort of predictions or speculation, more or less, about why people left. And then he brought up a story about his own personal backgrounds in business and stuff like that, and how some of that can be really damaging to businesses if speculation turns into news articles that turn into fact that hasn't been verified, right? And it's easy to look at large companies like OpenAI and say, oh, but it's OpenAI. We can speculate. They're a large company. And I think Carl had a good point, which was, hey, this is still a business and it still does impact them. And it can be very difficult if there's a lot of speculation about why people moved away to sometimes get past that. It can be damaging to the business, even though we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar business. Shouldn't they be afforded the same courtesies, if you will? It was a very valid point. I mean, you and I and him and Beth were all talking about it in the background.
Yeah, because they're people who are going to say that, this number of senior executives leaving is evidence of a toxic workplace, right? That there's no remaining cohesion among the founders, obviously, when so many of the founders have gone. I'm just going to say that in all my experience across decades in corporate and in startup world, I've never yet experienced one that was, enlightened to the end and didn't have any toxic elements. Right. There's going to be people and friction. One of the things I often said in a joking manner was, I can't wait for the day when the humans are no longer necessary in the corporate organization because they'll be replaced by AI or whatever. Why? Because human emotional, transactions in the workplace often lead to disgruntlement and tension and conflict. And that can be blamed for the kind of sort of exits that you're observing here. But that's really speculation, but also unnecessary to speculate about it, because obviously there are some people who are not happy with what was happening within OpenAI's transition from their original sort of investment thesis into the sort of the Sam Altman era of let's go for the big AGI shot here in the commercial world. So yes, there's that going on, but again, given that my position is that this is a seed burst, and these people are going to be highly gratified by the external validation of the market as they leave. I don't think that that's going to be the end story of this. It's not going to be like, oh, they really messed up and they collapsed. OpenAI is not on its road to collapse. It is still the market leader, and it seems to be making advancements every month.
But by the way, we have Beth has joined us, and I want to bring up 2 points to that, Andy, and then Beth, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. By the way, Beth, we just sort of started with there's so many different parts and pieces to OpenAI and investments. We're going to get all to that, it's funding and all, but we were just starting with the people. That's kind of where we started the conversation. But 2 things there, Andy. One, I tried to think of what I was going to say. One, now that, a year, well, just about a year, right? Since the whole shakeup with Sam Altman and all that stuff, that's talked about a lot. Oh, the board wanted to throw Sam out. What we have to remember in that weird week period right around Thanksgiving was also the letter with 300 names or whatever the total now names of people who said we will walk. I mean, there was a period there where we wondered whether, for 24 48 hours what OpenAI would exist at all, because people said if Sam isn't leading this, we will all go. And if you remember, there was a whole thing where basically Microsoft said, you all have a home here. We'll give you an office and you guys can go. And so there was that part of it. It was like a crazy time. But once the dust settled and Sam was back there, and Mira was what, she was CEO for a day or something like that when it was all said and done. And she was there, whatever. But so there's that part of it that I think is people have to remember is like, oh, like all these execs, yeah, well, also that's just the exec team. That's not even to talk about all the people who are probably very happy there, or probably perhaps have money invested in because they came in and it was part of their package or whatever. It doesn't necessarily have to be these top names. The other thing is, because you mentioned it, how big the company has gotten. So let's just talk about that. OpenAI is predicting its revenue will skyrocket to 11.6 billion next year from an estimated 3.7 billion in 2024. However, they're expecting losses of 5 billion this year. That has to do with training the models and an investment in data centers, I'm sure, as well as all the, infrastructure, as well as all salaries. And they said that number, that 5 billion, doesn't even include, like, I think bonuses and other kickoffs that would happen at certain levels and different things like that. So, burning and churning through cash very, very quickly in an effort to grow. But look, we can look at the numbers here. It's in one of my articles. I have like 7 articles open up right now talking about how much they've grown in terms of users just from March to August of this year. It's a phenomenal amount of growth. And that's nothing to say like where they've gone in just 12 months time since this sort of whole shakeup. A lot of that has been attributed to them allowing, now you can go on and use like a free version of ChatGPT. You don't have to log in. That opened that up to a lot of other places. Other places around the world now are also able to use ChatGPT without necessarily barriers. There's a lot to this, but this is a company that is growing exponentially quick. And, in a minute here, we can get into their current 6.5 billion round of funding or investing that they're talking about. We'll talk about where Apple is and everything else. But Beth, let me bring you in, since you weren't at the top of the show. Just what I asked Andy at the top was, hey, in your opinion, and Andy said no, by the way, he said, I think this is a seed burst, not necessarily indicative of a problem, but in your opinion, is this anything anybody should be concerned about? The fact that we've, over the last 12 months, we've had, some high level executives walk out of Chat or OpenAI, or is this to be expected of any company that's in this weird, unique position that they're in? Aren't you going to have turnover? So what is your take on that as far as who's leaving, I guess?
So I think you're definitely going to have turnover. The Ethan Malik made a post on X to address the speculation about this, and one of the things that he said was actually the fact that you're in a startup and there are people who've been there for more than 6 years or 6 years is kind of remarkable. That just the startup culture, the startup, like you have to live, eat, breathe this, tends to create a more rapid turnover.
Sure.
Also, I believe it was John Schulman, maybe. They tend to post their like I'm leaving, this is why kind of letters.
Mm-hmm.
Once they've given them to all of OpenAI, they tend to post them on X. And one of the things that he was saying, and I believe he's the one who went to Anthropic, was that the nature of the growth for him was that he grew out of doing direct tech things and was responsible for a department, which of course is how that happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, that's Mira too, right? Like Mira was directly involved in stuff, and then she rose to CTO. And when
Yeah.
there were like 10 people in the company, I'm sure she was much more hands-on. And he basically said, you know, I'm really proud. I feel really great about where things going. I'm very confident. And now I want to do the stuff that I'm interested in. And
Yeah.
when I go to this other position, I'm going to be able to put my hands more on that. So I think there's that as well.
Sure.
And you just need different kinds of people, right? You need
Yeah.
different skills. It's different skills to run a startup and launch it and now run a profitable larger business and that kind of stuff. And a bunch of this may just be people recognizing like I would rather do this over here because that's more suited to my personality.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about it.
And if finances aren't necessarily, I'm not saying, I don't know, this is total speculation. Like, assuming that they are vested or they're exiting the company in a good financial position, maybe this is their moonshot. Maybe, like, you know, Andy was saying, maybe they're going to go off and, like we've seen already, Ilya and others go off to do that thing that just is their greatest passion or whatever. And now, because I don't have to necessarily worry about my salary, I'm you know, like early people from Microsoft who are billionaires, Dell, same thing, billionaires from the early days of it, Amazon, obviously, right? So maybe this is their opportunity to go and do something that's, like you said, their passion. Maybe this wasn't necessarily it. I mean, God knows we all get into jobs and businesses and we start at places for all sorts of different reasons. These are still humans. And that's back to Andy's point about, we could talk about how crazy and the story of OpenAI is. At the end of the day, these are people who still get up, still have families, still have partners, still have kids, still have other things going on, you know, maybe elderly parents, maybe parents that they're the direct, you know, caretaker of, as you've talked about, Beth. Life is happening outside of this company. And, you know, whether they're having to put in 40 hours or 80 hours into it, it's not sustainable usually. And there's going to be churn. And there's that good saying, right, Andy, that says, like, you know, what got you here won't get you where you need to go. That's a typical comment about business. Or like, what got you to 500,000 won't get you to 5 million in revenue. Because typically you've brought in people who are experts at that level. That's why, like, a CRO, a typical tenure of a CRO is something like 2 years. 2 years. That's normal, because they come in with an expertise from here to here. And then when it goes, well, we've attained that, assuming they did, how are we going to get to 5 million? Well, I've never worked through that. So I may no longer be the right person to shepherd us to 5 million. So what do? That's the CRO leaves. Another one comes in who has taken a previous company from 500 to 500,000 to 5 million or whatever. So, like, just this to me is normal. And although it makes a lot of news because OpenAI is always going to be in the limelight, I'm with you guys where there's just 1,000 different reasons why we might have this. And as they're moving, and this is something we could talk about, as they're moving into this different model, business model for profit in 2025, there's people that obviously may choose, they maybe want to go back and work for just simply non-for-profits. What were you going to say, Beth?
So I think it's interesting that you bring up Ilya, because I feel like Ilya is in a slightly different category, in that we know that he left around the time of Sam's firing, and he did not release a statement about why, right? He released a statement that said, Sam has my full confidence or something like that around that time. But then his actions when he was ready to do something was to stand up a company that's devoted to safety, right? So that was what he was doing when he was at OpenAI. So we might be able to say that Ilya did have a little bit of a disagreement. There's certainly evidence that we could tease out from that, just from observable behavior of things that have happened. But that I think that isn't that he doesn't have confidence in OpenAI. I think it's that he has full confidence in OpenAI, and he would like this to be a little bit of a stronger situation. And outside of OpenAI, he has that ability, right?
I want to bring in a comment that's in the chat right now from Justin, who said, wouldn't OpenAI employees have to sign an agreement preventing them from leaving and starting a competing project? This is an interesting question, because when they joined, they were in this nonprofit mode. I don't know that there would have been the same kind of non-compete agreement for that particular kind of entity as there would be for a startup that was planning to be a commercial, exit for its investors. But it might very well have contained a non-compete agreement, but those typically expire. And in California also, there's new sort of litigation and law that makes it very difficult to prevent someone from working in their area of expertise. So even if they've signed a non-compete agreement, the kind of money that's going to be put behind some of these major players from OpenAI to go after a market opportunity in AI, that kind of money is going to provide them with the legal defense and the protections, if you will. But it's also possible that those agreements included a term that said, okay, you can't do this for 1 year, right? Because they're gentler. Those non-compete agreements have forcibly been reduced in terms of duration and also the clause that the hiring company puts into those people. Mm-hmm. So it could be that they're going to just be working on their product plans and so on while they're taking a little bit of a hiatus for 1 year, and then boom, they come out from the woodwork. And so I think that the non-compete agreements are not an issue for a market with this much draw.
I just want to add on to that. Number one, you already mentioned about California laws, a huge part of that, right? Because there's California laws against non-compete. And I was doing some research on the side because I was almost sure that there was a story thinking about Sam Altman apologizing for some older language in contracts, because this actually came up. Now, this is what I found really quick. This is back from May of this year. It might be what I was thinking of. These are the key points. This was from CNBC. OpenAI on Thursday, again, this is May, backtracked on a controversial decision to, in effect, make former employees choose between signing a non-disparagement agreement that would never expire and keeping their vested equity in the company. Now, this isn't the same thing as non-compete. We're talking about a non-disparagement. This might be what I might be getting this confused, but I think there was a non-compete as well. Basically, a spokesman had said, we're incredibly sorry that we're only changing this language now. It doesn't reflect our values or the company we want to be. I think there was something very similar to this directly from Sam, where there had been some language where people are like, it came out on X, or when somebody said, hey, I'm being blocked from going and working for Anthropic, or others. But we've watched people actually leave OpenAI and go work directly for Anthropic or other companies. So I do not believe it's an issue.
Anthropic itself was founded as, people left OpenAI.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't think, Justin, I mean, that's just my opinion on this. I don't think, based on what I remember, and of course we talk about this stuff all the time, that's actually an issue. Of course, you never really know what's going on with subtle internal between the line pressures and things like that aren't specifically written. There's always politics, but I don't believe people would necessarily be hurt in that sense.
Notably, the bigger names that we see, the more visible people who've left have left after May, right? To go and do that. So that clause might have had a little bit of an effect on people being really public.
Very interesting analysis there, Beth. I think that's true. There's another interesting question here, which is, in the original form of organization that OpenAI chose, was there any equity? So many of these people may not have had the opportunity to participate. Now, I think that would have been corrected in the interest of retention. So at about the same time in May, as they're planning the new thing, then all of those people that they wanted to make sure stuck around because they were essential to the ongoing operation and achievement of the very significant advances that have happened just in the last 6 months, that those people were granted some kind of phantom equity in what OpenAI's ultimate valuation would be. So I gotta believe that they did have some equity, which is why I said these people, they've made a pile of money. They're now being offered piles of additional money to go out and do something new. And the company OpenAI has reached a level of momentum and inertia that taking out these people doesn't cripple the operation.
Right. The other thing is that the structure that they were formed under, right? So it was the nonprofit structure. The goal of the nonprofit is to develop AGI to the benefit of humanity.
Right.
You can, as a company, sell services and products up to the point where you achieve AGI. And the other thing for me that like would be an interesting court case is that part of that mission is that if they see that another company is closer to AGI than they are based on that mission, they go and offer help to the company. Right? So I think you'd have a hard time saying, no, actually, I like their option better. I'm going to go there and help that company. I don't think you can sue me even before May about that. But they did not expect to need as much money, right? Again, I mean, if you look back when this was formed, they didn't know it was going to be successful.
Right.
None of them, right? Like AlphaGo had happened. Like you'd trained a machine to play a game. That's very different than training a machine to learn training software, training something to learn and then show its ability to generalize from those basic learnings of this is likely next, this is the most probable next, to the system that we have now.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if you joined them 5 years ago, you're not working for the same company. I mean, it's the same company in name, but holy moly, what you signed on for and what you're probably currently working on would have to be very different. Some people are going to be fine with that and say all signs point forward towards AGI. And that's what I got on this train for. Others are going to have other opinions on that. Again, it's a very human thing. I do want to take some time and make sure we pivot a bit here. By the way, we have thank you to everybody in the comments, Gwen and Justin and Cisco and Norman. Thanks for coming in from the Bermuda Islands. Just a lot of awesome, great points in here. People pointing out, like Gwen was saying, right on, Beth. When you talk about, trying to manage people and how that could be a huge challenge. So great comments. And what we always love about the comment section on YouTube is people are those conversations are happening, not just comments to us per se as the co-host, but they're actually having conversations between each other. Always a great place to not only for us to learn, but also just love to see that conversation going. What I wanted to talk about really quick was, where is OpenAI? So they obviously, we've been talking, Sam Altman has said in 2025, we're going to reorg, we're going to restructure. Why? Well, one of the reasons is there is a profit cap for investors, which you can imagine makes it probably pretty hard to get future funding. Now, if they get this next round through of 6.5 billion, they will be valued at $150 billion in 2025. Now, going back to what we talked about earlier, because I just saw the numbers, I told you about their improvements. They have grown. In August, they had 100 and whatever it was million people in it, which was 1,700 times growth since the beginning of 2023. Now, remember, that's after the boom of ChatGPT 3.0 at that point, right? That had already happened at the beginning of 2023. They were the fastest people, to 100 million subscribers or something like that, right? In January, 1,700 times growth since the beginning of 2023. 150 billion valuation if this next round goes through. So they're currently working on this, but it is a lot of these investing companies, I think, these private firms and stuff, are looking and making sure that it's contingent on this. I know on one of them, I think Thrive Capital, they said they'd sort of sweetened the deal for them and said, if you invest now at 1.5 billion, whatever they're going to put into it, and the thing goes through next year, you'll be able to invest at a lower rate next year, right? Thrive Capital and all the people who are part of those funds obviously want to be part of this juggernaut, not just the employees, but all the investment. There's a lot going on here. One of the stories that literally just came out was that Apple had actually backed out of being part of the investing. For a while, Apple was one of the companies, which would have been highly odd. Apple doesn't usually do this. I don't know what the stats are. I just know that it's unusual. And they didn't provide necessarily more information than that, but that Apple had backed out of the investing round, which made people curious. Hey, is that going to impact Apple Siri on Apple still having ChatGPT functionality, and apparently those two things are not related in that sense. Apple was just talking about being part of the 6.5 billion investing funding round, and this other thing is this other thing as far as being on Apple devices. So just interesting. I don't know that it means anything. I don't think there's any doom and gloom to talk about, or like, oh my God, Apple backed out. They're just not part of this investment round, and that's not to say that they won't necessarily be in the future. So I just wanted to get your guys' perspectives on this 6.5 billion investment round that's going on, 150 billion projected valuation in 2025. You know, where does this go? Assuming that they get through these hurdles of changing the structure of the company, you know, what's the potential here? A $1 trillion company in the next 3 years? I mean, I think so. I think they're right up there with Apple and others, assuming that they can still lead and be the leader when it comes to models, because 4.0 has sat on top for a while. Now we've seen some other competitors. We know that X is building 10 more data centers, and there's more to talk about on that for OpenAI, right? Can other people beat them in compute? And could we see in 1 year's time that ChatGPT is no longer the primary language model that people use?
I'm skeptical that anyone can, in the short term, overcome the momentum and the catchment of users that ChatGPT has as a brand. Think about Google. Google had just an easier to use product than many of the existing search engines that were in some respects much more sophisticated in terms of their overall user presentation and capabilities. But Google had a very, very reliable and simple UI, and they had a reliable system for organizing the links, if you will, in a search return, a search engine result page, which was the PageRank algorithm. And that simple start allowed them to basically wipe out everybody else on the map. I think that OpenAI is like Google at this point in the game. There will be other players, as there still are other search engines, DuckDuckGo for security, Arc's coming onto the scene, but they're tiny fractions of the overall volume that a Google does. And I think the same is going to persist for OpenAI. I think OpenAI is pretty sticky. ChatGPT, everybody's now learned that platform and its way of being used. Jumping over to a new one, even as simple a transition as going from OpenAI to Claude, for the average user, not aficionados of AI as we might be, who can, figure out how to use either platform interoperably in many cases as we build systems that can access multiple different models. But the average consumer and or company that's going to be using this, they're going to choose the one that everybody already knows and knows how to use. And that's a very hard thing to displace.
We've seen that, in fact, in the awareness, in the use, right? Like when this episode gets published, there will be a link that comes up here about what show it is, and I do not know what show it is, but it was one of the research reports that we were talking about, and like Claude wasn't even on it, wasn't even part of the top. Yeah. And OpenAI had such a bigger name recognition that it was, I think that's part of why they are not releasing in such an aggressive way anymore, because basically there's not a need to, if you're happy with your growth and you're happy with the profit structure, and then maybe need to do some restructuring of your company so that things are more in alignment, being able to handle more and more customers, right? Because all of us who've been in there from the very beginning have also said privately or publicly at one time or another, they don't function like a company that wants to keep their customers really happy, right? They don't function like that is the most important thing. And it's not. They function like a company that wants to create AGI, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly frustrations that go along with it. And I just want to point out the part where you guys talked about, like, it's the name recognition. So at Scaled, where I work, we have made early on, I will say, I think I was actually a little more tool agnostic in terms of what we were building for sales solutions. However, we scaled that back, no pun intended. We scaled that back to just deploying what turned out to be custom GPTs in OpenAI. And the reason was simply that as we did enough polling of our target audience, which are going to be CROs and sales teams, that's what Scale Consulting does, is a sales consulting team, of which I am the AI strategist at it, but that's what we do. So we talk to sales teams all the time. And it became very, very apparent that not only was there really no idea what Claude or Anthropic was, and maybe a Google Gemini or something like that, and Copilot, because Copilot inundates us with emails about 365. Never mind that. Even at that time, when we first built our initial custom GPTs and put them out for purchase for companies, there was barely an understanding of what could be done with ChatGPT. It's September 30th. I'm starting a whole new cohort that we'll be talking about ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Claude next Wednesday, right? That I have a whole bunch of people in that have signed up and paid to be in and whatever through Scaled. And the whole reason for that is that, hey, it's important if you're in sales, it's important if you're in this industry to know a little bit about these other tools. But without a doubt, it's ChatGPT. That's where the name recognition is. It's OpenAI because of this stuff. All the stuff we're talking about today, the reason we're even having this conversation. We're not having a conversation about who's left Anthropic's board or who's left Anthropic in the last 12 months. I don't even know. I don't even know if there's been any crazy ones. Has somebody of huge significance left Anthropic in the last 6 months? It hasn't come across my radar. Maybe, but it's just not promoted. It's not talked about the same way OpenAI is. And the other thing is, to your point, Beth, like, they are producing insanely impressive improvements towards an AGI, towards agents, towards whatever in reasoning, as we saw with O1 preview and whatever come after that. But I think we've also become, as just a culture, so conditioned to getting things so fast. Oh, it doubles, it's twice as good, it's whatever. But if we were to put them and their level of progress up against anything in history, I mean, wouldn't we have to say, like, this is an insane amount of progress in a very, very short period of time for a company to produce? I would think so.
Yes, and interesting that you are referencing Anthropic, because in this horse race that we're watching, Anthropic has been much more narrowly focused. Anthropic did not add a web search, right? Go search your stuff and bring it to Anthropic. It is not doing that for you. Anthropic does not have a voice interface right now. Like, there are very specific things that Anthropic is focused on, and it is not right now getting distracted in the same kind of way. Although I love the distractions, definitely distract me. Keep doing it, OpenAI. Super excited about the distractions. But the other thing is that Andy said people left OpenAI to form Anthropic. And the main idea was that they were early in all you need is more. Right? All you need is attention. The founders of Anthropic were like, no, just give us more. I don't want a limited budget. I want, like, as much as we can get in terms of training. Right? So we want the most power. We want the most time. We want, like, that was the focus. And that's super interesting now that has seemed to be accurate. Right? And now everybody is much more vocal about that. That's the goal too.
That's a good point. Yeah, and let's not forget, Anthropic was built differently. It has a constitution. It's just fundamentally, it's a different type of model on how it was trained. It was trained through a constitution, not necessarily through human reinforcement feedback loops. So just a different beast. And we love it. We all, I mean, like I said, it's gonna be a huge part, along with Perplexity, about this new cohort that I'm starting, because it's really, really important to understand where a tool like Claude can be very valuable to you, where a ChatGPT might fall down a bit. Same thing with Perplexity. And it's not even about the three of them independently, it's like, what kind of superpowers do you get when you're able to understand how to bring them all together on a project, on a thought process, on a new sales implementation, on new outreach emails, how to use all three tools together, right? As we're kind of getting,
I wanted to add one point, which is there are two examples out there, or three examples out there in my mind, of significant competition for OpenAI in terms of developing an approach to the market that will reach scales that are similar to OpenAI's. And they are Google, Meta, and Microsoft. So, and each of them has an ecosystem of users already, that they're not building a brand new user base as OpenAI is. Those user counts that we're talking about are, new individuals who are signing up for OpenAI services or using OpenAI services via APIs within the context of their enterprise customer implementation, right? But for Meta, which just recently announced its new Orion glasses, those augmented reality glasses, Meta is going to be able to deliver AI power in the context of the tools you already use, from their WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, all those things, plus their emerging metaverse kinds of applications for those AR glasses. Now those are multi-billion, marketplaces already. And then Microsoft has enterprise implementations of their Office 365, and they'll put AI into that. And then Google, of course, in the Chrome browser, Gemini, in all of the services of the app suite that Google offers, you'll see AI integrated into those. And those will be very substantial counterparts where people like you and me will end up using those tools in those contexts. But that doesn't change the nature of what OpenAI has done, which is really amazing over the last couple of years, to achieve the level of use and brand awareness that they have. And yes, they basically hijacked the central terms that are used in what we understand as AI, which is generative pre-trained transformers that are doing text generation, and you chat with it, right? So ChatGPT, they kind of captured the core of what AI for user experience is, and that's a brand that's hard to get by.
Well, as we know now, though, AI only means Apple intelligence. So clearly Apple has fixed that.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about AI anymore. It only means Apple intelligence, not artificial. One part of this story that we didn't get to, I just want to take 2 minutes at the end because I do think it's important. We circle back to energy quite a bit on this show, and there's good reason for that. And so just in the last, well, literally, this was updated today at 2:39 a.m. So says Finance on Yahoo. But OpenAI reportedly has been to the White House with other people as well, talked to President Biden, but reportedly is looking to build 5 gigawatt data centers, which is to say the power it would require, data centers would require the power of 5 gigawatts. Now, if you weren't subscribed to our newsletter, you missed out on me sort of talking about that. But what I will say is 5 gigawatts, just for reference sake, 5 gigawatts is like, it's more than you need for Miami. It's as much as 100 times the requirement of a standard large data center. So it's 1% of global electricity consumption. Like, it's not a tiny number is what I'm trying to say. And so we've heard these moonshots before for Sam Altman. I'm trying to raise $7 trillion, right? And then he sort of walked back. I do kind of love a Sam Altman quote where it's like, we have these numbers, and it even said at the end of one of the reports or one of the blogs, and it said he's since scaled back to multiple hundreds of billions. And I thought, well, that's nice of him. He's scaled way back his ambitions and what OpenAI wants to do. But I do love this idea that OpenAI is like does not seem to be bound by the numbers and the dollar figures that we have used up to this point, which probably says a lot about where this company feels like they can go. They're not going to say, oh, we would love to be someday a $1 trillion company. They're like, well, that's probably assumed. And what we're really saying is we'll be a $20 trillion company. You're going, wait a minute, hold on. We don't have anybody over 3 right now. And OpenAI seems to be saying, well, what does that have to do with us? Which is really interesting. So it does go back to the data centers. Everybody is playing this game. We've talked about this already with Microsoft and Bill Gates involved in all this kind of stuff, nuclear power, all these things. The reality is the power is going to have to come from somewhere. OpenAI and other companies are talking to the US government with whoever the next president's going to be. Not getting into politics on that side, but somebody's going to be in the office come January. And, we will have to see how this plays out. Are they going to help them build these? Because it's strategically important for the US to have OpenAI and others like it succeed. And to do so, they're going to need these data centers. Very, very interesting. But I don't know. Let's step back. We're right on time here. Let's just wrap it up. Are we worried about OpenAI? And he's
no, if I could invest in it, OpenAI, I would.
Yeah. Are you worried about OpenAI?
I am not worried about OpenAI as a continuing company. Not at all.
Yeah, I feel the same. I think they're going through growing pains like anybody else. It's unique. It's interesting. We haven't really had something like this to talk about and this type of growth. We've certainly seen, skyrocketing companies before, but OpenAI is sort of in a class of their own right now. So that's why we have conversations about it. Okay. We're going to leave it there because we could go on and on. There's always going to be more news. If there's news on Wednesday when we typically do our news shows, we can do that. And even this Friday, we have what we call our biweekly recap show. It's sort of our hold on, what did we say? And this may very well come back up in that conversation as well, especially if we have any of our other co-hosts on as well.
So just quick, tomorrow is OpenAI's first dev day. So come back. We're doing some great topic tomorrow. Come back also on Wednesday because that will likely come up, whatever they announce tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. And then so talking about tomorrow, our topic for tomorrow is, can AI actually boost efficiency? Can it go beyond the hype? Wednesdays, I already said, and Beth was just saying, we'll talk about the news. So obviously if anything comes out of the dev day, we'll talk about it then. And we may also hit it on Friday. On Thursday, we have a really cool topic, which is AI as a crime solver. Is this more revolution or is this more risk? Is this Minority Report? Can you be predetermined for crimes? Where is this going in the future? Sort of a fun conversation to have. That will be on Thursday of this week. So like I said, tons to talk about. It's fast moving. This is a fast moving time of year for all the sort of AI news and companies. You can always see it sort of rev up. So keep coming back the rest of this week and definitely on until the rest of this Q4 as we kick it off tomorrow. Because there's just going to be a lot between now and the end of the year. If you're curious about what our predictions are on that, you can go back and check out our shows from last week, because we gave you our Q4 predictions for 2024, not even 2025. So that starts tomorrow. Go check them out. See if you think we're right. And we'll find out in 90 days, right? Okay, that's it for today. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Beth, for hanging out. Thank you to everybody. Oh, my goodness. We had a lot of commenters. We had a lot of good conversations going on there. Always appreciate everybody in there. Like I said, go to thedailyaishow.com. You can find all about all other previous episodes. This is episode 301. 300 was on Friday. So moving onward and upward. And you can also sign up for the newsletter there. Like I said, there's quite a few things that went in that newsletter this week that we didn't necessarily touch on in the show. So if you like what we're talking about, you like these types of conversations, I highly recommend signing up for that newsletter, because it's just more. It's more of us and more about the things we love talking about AI. All right, that's it. We will see you guys tomorrow for another great show. Until then, bye.